Well, welcome everybody to the Too High podcast. It is Monday night. The Los Angeles Rams have just finished absolutely destroying the Arizona Cardinals. Diante Lee, what's up?
What's up, guys? For the people who do watch on video, your favorite outdoors podcast co-host is inside, not because I want to be, but because it's raining. Otherwise, I would just be out in the dark of Monday night, braving the elements.
But like I'm good, man. Not only do you live in San Diego, and just like that general idea taunts me, but you do the podcast outside. Like, that's like double taunting. I don't think you understand how much snow is on the ground right now and how much I'm going to have to shovel up my car tomorrow morning.
I wouldn't know. I know that this is... You know what? The one thing that I will say that I like completely empathize with, for especially you living in a place that's like, that gets a lot of snow, is that I think for people who don't deal with snow, like, it's hard to conceptualize what the quote unquote snow season is, because in some places it's cute, right? It's like, oh, we get a month usually where it's like bad snow. For some places, a snow season means your ass is inside from late October until mid-March, damn near.
This is a stupid thing, but I am like empathetic towards my car and other cars in the winter, which is very stupid because a car, as you know, is an inanimate object.
Right.
But I'm always like, these guys are just outside all the time. They have you put them in a garage or something, but like they're cold all the time. That's really weird that I have these feelings toward cars, but I want them to be warm once in a while. I get to go inside. They don't. All right. Anyways, let's talk about what just happened in the playoffs. Super Wildcard weekend. We will have the divisional round kind of preview on the next podcast. But for now, we're going to quickly look at the games that happened on the wildcard weekend and really talk about the teams that lost and kind of visit like what we think of them going forward, how they're going to have to get into this offseason to fix why they lost in the wildcard round. So before we do that, just a reminder that PFF, the Too High podcast is sponsored by PFF. And right now you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use the promo code TOOHIGH, TWOHIGH. All of PFF's locked article content, NFL betting dashboards for the playoffs. NFL Green 9, by the way, is up 27 units this season. Player prop tool, NFL draft guide, much, much more. Support the pod and use promo code TOOHIGH for 25% off any sub. All right, so we have to start, of course, with the only upset of wildcard weekend, which was the Cowboys losing to the 49ers. 49ers getting in to the playoffs in overtime against the Rams a week ago, and now they're already off to the divisional round. We saw some wild coaching decisions, to say the least.
Yeah.
Let's start with the punt. Let's go linear chronologically. Let's start with this punt situation. Yes or no? Is that the worst decision coaching thing you've ever seen in your whole life?
That is probably the most poorly executed special situation thing I've ever seen. Like, I don't even know where to start with it. Keep in mind the fact that the initial plan worked. Faking the punt to get the first down. It worked. Like, this, it's not like this is something that started in disaster. This started off with a good thing, okay? And here's another thing that I want people to remember. Not only did they complete the pass, the guy goes out of bounds. So you have a complete dead ball situation. This is what we're starting with. The ref gets to set the ball, start the clock. Everybody gets a chance to get set. And then we get 38 to 45 seconds of some of like the most confusing, unexplainable sequences of events that I've ever seen. Like, what is the most egregious thing for you? Is it the punter walking back and forth? Was it the sudden change, like the delay of game? What was it for you?
I think for me was them. So I think what the idea was is they were going to line up, go for the fake punt, get the fake punt, hurry up with the San Francisco punt return team on the field and just get them confused. Like, oh my God, wait, what the hell's going on? Do we have to stay off the field? And then they're thinking, once that fake punt happens, once the first down is completed, kind of like automatically your brain turns off. If you're a punt returner or on the punt return team, your brain turns off and you just start going to the sideline. And they were hoping to catch them all walking to the sideline, I think. The issue was the 49ers kept their defense on the field. They played what we call punt safe. So now the Cowboys get to the line of scrimmage and the 49ers are like, well, this is weird. Like, we're not saying it's not weird. However, we're not affected by this because we were going to be on the field anyways because we're mostly the defense.
Defense anyways, yes.
So then them not having a plan for if San Francisco isn't punt safe makes no sense. Them just saying, hey, they're in punt safe. We get the first down off the fake, and that's it.
Hey,
like, we don't have to continue with this.
Here's another idea. If you've got the unit on the field and it takes you 28 seconds to make a decision, just run the play.
That too, yeah.
Like, how about you just...
Did they have a play? Do you think they had a play?
I mean, it doesn't seem very apparent. They had to have had a play because the punter goes from being a punter to being a slot receiver to being a slot receiver on the other side of the field to going back to being a slot receiver on the opposite end of the field. So I'd have to think, unless they have the most elaborate check with me, no huddle offense I've ever seen, like they had to have had some kind of plan. And then, this is the most egregious thing to me. So we've described everything that gets up to this point. The referees, because the substitution happens, they correctly reset the play clock in case there's a large personnel change. So they reset the play clock to 20 seconds when the initial substitution happens. So now you would think, hey, special teams coordinator, your plan for this week, it's dead. Let's get the offense back on the field. We'll run a real play. No, instead what you get is another 6 seconds of everybody just dawdling around, and then they try to sprint the entire offense on the field. For whatever, I don't know if Mike McCarthy knows this, but in football now, when you make a mass substitution, the defense gets the right to substitute the personnel they want on the field too, and the referee's not budging until all of the defensive players are set. Not when the 11th defensive player gets on the field, but all 11 defensive players need to be set before he steps away from the ball. Now you've got 0.8 seconds to get your snap off. And again, here's another thing. At any point in this conversation, you know what stops this from being a topic? A timeout. There's nothing that's precluding you from burning the timeout. So on every level, in terms of planning, the planning is fine. You want to run a fake punt. It makes sense to run a fake punt around midfield, especially when you're chasing scores and you need to keep possessions. Not mad at that. The idea of trying to rush to the line of scrimmage, I like that idea because you are hoping, even if you don't force a timeout, even if you don't get the premium look, you know what you really want? You want them to have 14 guys on the field, right? You want the 3 defensive players that were watching the punt happen. They see you fake the punt. They go, oh, shit, I got to get back on the field. Throw their helmet on. Now you got 14, 15 guys on the field. Nobody knows who's supposed to be on and who's supposed to be off. You get a legal substitution or participation or whatever.
Yeah.
5-yard penalty, easy money. But the second, and this is something I have to believe was practiced at the NFL level because I know that I've practiced this at the high school level. The second that you realize the look is not the look, you say it's dead. We're killing it. Offense back on the field. I don't care if you just run inside zone because you don't have a real play. I don't care if you run all hitches because you don't have a real play. Shit, you could take a knee for all I care if you don't have a real play. But what you can't do is spend 30 seconds with your punt team on the field doing nothing and then sprint your offense on the field without a play call. So I don't know what the offensive coordinator was doing. Don't know what the head coach is doing in the meantime. And now you've got everybody standing, staring at each other while the play clock ticks off. Nobody calls a timeout. And this is in a key situation where now you're in 1st and 15 on the 41 now instead of the 36. So you know what that does to your drive? It means now you're fighting to get back in the field goal range in a drive where you need 6 points, and that ends up costing them in the end. And we'll get to why it cost them in the end. Right?
One of many pre-snap penalties.
Yes, multiple.
That was very easily avoidable. The thing that I don't understand is, so I think the special teams coordinator is Fossil. I don't remember. It's not John Fossil. It's the son. But anyways, how in the week planning up to this doesn't go from Fossil to McCarthy to Kellen Moore and be like, hey, we might need a play here. So if this happens, we might have to rush the offense on the field, have a play ready. But they rush out on the field with 12 seconds left, and they're trying to get lined up, and Dak is calling out signals like they don't have a play. So what you're saying, just call your whatever base, call inside zone or whatever. But that was, and then again, so they take a 5-yard penalty, one of many in the game, and it cost them. And then we get to the end of the game, which I think both of us, this quarterback draw at the end of the game, I think both of us are not. We don't think that is the fireable offense.
No.
What we just explained with the punt, that is ridiculous. I mean, that is a fireable offense. But the quarterback draw, I think, is I don't want to say it's a good idea, because I think there were problems, especially with how much time was left. I think if you added 3 seconds and they ran it, that's a beautiful play. But the thing is, it's like nothing you could do. You couldn't throw to the sideline. You couldn't really get a stoppage that wasn't an incompletion. If there was any throw that was a completion, it was going to take too much time. Right. So I think they said, hey, we can control this time a little better if Dak never throws the football. And they just couldn't control it as much as they thought, because there was only 14 seconds left, and then the clock runs out, and then again with the setting of the ball and all that stuff, that's not really on Dak or the center. I mean, they're in like, fight or flight mode, so they're just like running around and trying to figure it out. I think that it was not a bad call, and then you take your shot at the end zone if they get the spike in. I mean, the other thing is you take two shots at the end zone. But I think they were close. I just feel like if they would have gotten the last play off, they were close enough that they could like run a play in the end zone.
I mean, yeah, you can, and it doesn't necessarily
rather than a Hail Mary.
All 4 receivers clump up in the right corner of the end zone and throw it up. You could have actually like run a play.
So yeah, that's why I'm like, it's not like the worst thing in the world, and I'm not like that. It's funny how it ended. It's hilarious.
Yes, especially because dying laughing. Yeah, this is
I was dying laughing.
I loved every bit of it.
But I don't think it was like the worst play call of all time type of thing.
Right. I mean, and again, like this is all situational stuff we're talking about, right? So like field positioning really, really matters here. And when I recap the game for my freelance work, like the thing that I was describing was like there's a very delicate balance in end of game situations between yards gained and time saved, especially when you're talking about a situation where you don't have the luxury of timeouts, right? Like now every decision you make has to be made with the next move in mind. So I think that's, I piggyback off of what you're saying when you talk about like it's not the worst idea in the world with 13 seconds left at midfield to say, hey, between a snap, a throw, a catch, and a run, we're probably using up half of that clock that we have available anyways. And we still would have to clock the ball or get a second play off. So the best option we have is for the guy who takes the snap to be the one who controls the action. I think that it's smart, again, to even for a quarterback like Dak, who is capable of throwing from 50 yards out, right? Like he's an NFL quarterback at the end of the day. I think it's also smart to say, hey, so especially with the day that they've had against the pressure that they were seeing, I also think it's a good idea to say, if we can get to the 35, if we can get to the 30, even if there's quick pressure, Dak can bail 10 yards backwards if he needs to set his feet and uncork it, rather than, hey, if San Francisco sends any kind of pressure and just plays man, he's got to get the ball out right now, and we're not even going to have enough time to get deep enough down the field to be able to threaten the end zone. So again, from a planning perspective, it's not the worst thing in the world. I think Dak maybe when he got to the 30 or so, saw that he had a little bit more space and maybe thought that he got to his landmark faster than he did and lost track of time. Because I think if he would have understood that he was already under like 8 or so seconds or whatever, he probably goes down like 5 or 8 yards before, saves himself the 2 seconds, and then you're actually able to get that spike off. And some of this is bad fortune too. Like, I mean, there's no way to simulate in a practice scenario that the umpire is going to
Yeah.
trip over the feet of your center and then have to set the ball. Like, so there is some merit to the criticism from people who have done this, at this level before, saying, "Hey, the job is to slide, find the ref, get the ball, and let
Yeah.
him set the ball." There's merit in that, but like you said, I mean, hey, dude, this is an end of game situation. If I'm Dak Prescott, I just want to make sure that we have 7 guys on the line of scrimmage before we run this play. Because if it's a legal formation, it don't matter what I do. The clock's it's an automatic 10-second runoff. The game's over. So again, like I'm not mad at that one not working out. It just so happened to be just maybe 10% off in execution in a situation where being 10% off is going to end the game and send you home. The punt was the worst of it. And then obviously, like not being able to get off the field in the drive before or save themselves some extra time in the drive before, that really, really stung. So, like,
They
no harm, no
had
foul at the end, but
Yeah, the drive before, I mean, they had him in a long yardage situation. Well, first of all, you have the Randy Gregory holding call, which again is hilarious because he tackled the
dude,
offensive
yeah, to
lineman.
say, I think I said it. I said it in our group chat. I was like, dude, this is always the funniest call in the world to me. Like, because you have to be such an asshole of a ref to even be looking to call this.
But,
Like, but
okay, well,
one
wait
thing I
though,
will say
because
is that if you're looking at it by the letter of the law, and then you watch the tape of what Randy Gregory did, like, if you're a ref, what are you supposed to
well,
do?
because there's defensive holding, which you, I'm sure, as a defensive coordinator, don't believe exists. It
Oh, and
does.
my defense would never. We would never hold on to a guard that's trying to get to the second level.
Right,
Never.
exactly, and that's what the penalty is there to in there for, is just like what defensive tackles, usually defensive tackles, sometimes defensive ends, but like what they'll do is like when a offensive lineman is on you and wants to get off you to go block a linebacker or something, you hold on to him
Right.
so that your linebacker can go make a play or whatever.
Exactly.
This was egregious. He
Like he
tackled
was
the guard.
like full grip of the chest
So
plate,
you
like tearing the guy backwards.
Yeah. So
So
like that's a different story. But they even had a loss I think on the next set of downs, and then Debo came with like a 19-yard carry on like third
that
and
end
20 or
around,
whatever.
yeah, that hurt. That hurt. Really, really hurt.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think the question is, we're going to talk about the offense in a second, but with McCarthy, um, my question to you is, what does he do there? Like, what do you do here, Mike McCarthy?
that's my biggest question right now. And based on what I think his job is, if we're evaluating him on the merits of his ability to manage game situations, manage the clock, understand situational football, make sure that your best players are touching the football and that you're guiding your young offensive coordinator through his first playoff game, this is the kind of game. No, I don't want to say should, but this is the kind of game where you have to start asking questions about how valuable your current head coach actually is. Because if we were to take what we know of this operation from the outside in at face value, where Kellen Moore basically has carte blanche control over the offensive play calling. You pointed this out to me, and I was cracking up because I think we see it the same way. Anytime the camera cuts to Mike McCarthy, he has the play sheet folded. Like I have never once seen like not even the marker to make a note on what play works. Like I don't think that he's doing anything other than reading the play as Kellen Moore is calling it in. Um, he obviously is not in charge of the defense. Dan Quinn has been running that defense since for as long as we've known him to be a defensive play caller. So that's not in his control either. Mike McCarthy is nobody's idea of a special teams guy. Like that's never been his
Well,
role.
they have like one of the best special teams
Exactly,
coordinators
they
in
have
the
one of the
game.
best special teams coordinators in football. So if I'm to, and you clearly don't have any GM control because all of the players here that are the most impactful were here before you got there. So this is a Stephen Jones roster. So you're telling me you're not a part of personnel, you're not a part of offensive play calling, you're not a part of defensive play calling, you're not the developer guy because that's also never been your role. You've been the West Coast offense play caller guy. The only thing that we can evaluate you on then is how you manage the big picture stuff. Why would I keep you? And that's before we even get to the conversation about the fact that your two coordinators might not even be in the building by February. Like both your coordinators, especially now that you've been eliminated ahead of conference championship and divisional round. So all these teams with openings actually have an opportunity to go interview your guy and make a decision on whether or not they want to offer him. Your guys could be gone before February. And to me, if I'm Stephen Jones, if I'm Jerry Jones, and I'm looking at this scenario, and you're telling me that I'm losing the defensive coordinator who basically fixed this defense in a year's time, man. You're talking about losing the offensive coordinator that you incubated here. Like, they built him up from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator little by little, and now he's gone. And this guy that you brought in, who's supposed to be the analytics, I went and embraced all the data and did my studies, and I'm on top of everything, and I embrace all these things, and I'm ready to just be the CEO type.
I want it to be known that neither me or Diante were in Cincinnati for the Mike McCarthy visit to PFF.
I had nothing to do with this, and I could have taught. And if he did, I would have told him that fake punt, no huddle plan was idiotic to begin with. Okay, that wouldn't have been on my packet. But yeah, like why keep him? You're going to keep him and trust him to bring in the next coordinators and trust that he's going to improve on these late game decisions. I think I talked on the podcast in week 2 or whenever it was that the Cowboys played the Chargers when they like almost lost themselves a game and forced Greg Zuerlein to kick like a 59-yarder to win the game because they mismanaged the clock. Like, this is not the first instance of him mismanaging into game situations. This one is just the one that happens to end their season. And I think if you're taking a big picture evaluation of this, because they have so many of the pieces in place, you have to be in Super Bowl mode. And you got to go. I think you really have to consider whether or not there's another guy on the market that can get you over that hump.
I think I will give leeway to coaches, head coaches who are also play callers when it comes to game management, because I think that's, in my opinion, too much on your plate. But if you're not play calling in any of the 3 phases, and you can't get this shit right when that's all you're doing on game day, then what I don't get it. Like, I don't see the point. Might as well not have you there. Might as well have the OC just make all those decisions. Like that's where I just like, doesn't make sense to me. I'd be scared if they lose Kellen Moore to wherever, and he says I'm gonna take the offense. That would scare the shit out of me. I don't want that. So yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you. I just don't understand the point. And maybe he's like the best dude in the world, and he motivates the players, and that's what he's good, and he's like really good at it. I don't know if that's true, given what we remember from the Packers days. So even that, like, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know what he could be doing that's more important than managing the game, and he's not doing a good job of it. He's mismanaging timeouts, challenges. It's baffling to me. But let's talk about Kellen Moore and the offense. This is something that we've talked about on this podcast quite a bit, is the issues, and this is a really good offense, but the issues of this kind of offense that doesn't have like a macro identity, I think. Like the Packers might, like Shanahan, like McVay, like whoever else, real like, hey, we like these plays and we kind of put them together, and we have the glue that holds it all together. And the glue meaning A, Dak Prescott, and then B, some really good players around Dak Prescott, which holds the fact that they're not really a consistent offense with like a lot of like, let's say like progressions and stuff off their base play calls. And it puts a lot on Dak Prescott's shoulders. And it's funny, I'm watching the game with friends who aren't on football Twitter or aren't football analysts like we are and stuff, and like you hear like, Dak sucks. I'm like, and I think this is what ends up happening is there's so much on Dak's plate. He's not quite Tom Brady, obviously, that you see these games like this where it's like, what the hell is wrong with this offense? What's going on? I can't believe it. Dak, he's the worst player ever, blah, blah, blah. And we said it last week on the pod. This whole offense is him going first progression to second progression to third progression to fourth progression to check down. Like so often. When I think about play calling, I think, and this is what I wrote about in my article today on Kellen Moore and the Dak Prescott offense, is like your first job as a play caller on offense, your first job is to get your quarterback to his first read as often as possible. Call the play, and like everyone in the NFL runs the same fucking designs. Like everyone's running the same damn plays in the NFL. Get that play call matched up against a defense where you can get the quarterback to his first read. A good example is that I used it in the article. The touchdown to Amari Cooper, they get man coverage. What do we like versus man coverage? Slot fades. Dak, 1, 2, 3 hits, throw, beautiful, touchdown. And you just don't see that enough in the Dallas offense. And then the next thing, and you see it, man, Shanahan is so good at it. McVay is so good at it. Stefanski, in 2020 with Baker Mayfield when he got hot by the end of the season was so good at that.
Gary Kubiak in Minnesota with Kirk Cousins.
The next thing is manufacturing open receivers down the field. And again, we go back to like, I'll even talk about like Sean Payton. Like, yes, Sean Payton runs this like, quote unquote West Coast maybe type of style offense with a lot of personnel groupings and stuff like that. And he had Drew Brees for sure. But he was so good at getting guys open, man. He was so good at it's just helping your quarterback. Even though I have Drew Brees, I can create a play where he can just throw the ball to an open receiver 20 yards down the field. We can go catch and run. And you saw it with Shanahan in this game on the other side of the field when they hit Brandon Ayuk for a big play off their play action game. It was a third progression off their base play. Mm-hmm. Flood concept that they run all the time. And then what they do with the flood concept is instead of running a corner route, their first progression is corner post. They showed that. And then the third progression was the guy coming all the way from the backside wheeled up the field after. And that was Ayuk.
That's the backside alert. Like the amount of go ahead.
They'll say that's their third progression off the play, and he gets an open receiver. And of course, Jimmy Garoppolo underthrows him as he tends to do. But regardless, and I just don't see that stuff in the Kellen Moore offense. Play design is good. Like I understand what they're trying to do. But what ends up happening is you get a lot of like nice designs where Dak has to find his third and fourth read. And I'm like, oh, he's doing a really good job going through his progression because this isn't open and that's not open. And then you end up with a 5-yard hook to Amari Cooper, and it's like, that's good quarterbacking. You're not getting any yards for it though. And that's why Dak has this weird, everyone has this really different idea of Dak. Like he's so polarizing. And I know a lot of quarterbacks are polarizing. It just feels like Dak is the most polarizing because of this. That's it, yeah.
So to me, it's so funny that you do this comparison because what you just described, and this is an offensive guy, what you just described, especially from a coaching perspective, is a difference between design and scheme, right? Like there is a difference between being somebody who designs good plays and being somebody who has a good scheme, because the layer that's missing between design and scheme is all the contextual information that goes into, hey, when do we set up the shot play, right? Like everybody obviously remembers when all of football Twitter was going insane over leak. The reason why, especially when the Rams are doing it, the reason why the Rams are able to get leak off basically every week in 2018 for what felt like a 9-week straight period is because of all the stuff that goes into setting up the play, right? Like, and there's a reason why you don't see it as much, and it's because they're not as outside zone dependent as they were back then. They're not as jet sweep dependent as they were back then. Like, so, and if you handed that playbook to somebody else, they probably would try leak every time you're between the 40s, right? Like you would have, there's a certain kind of, tiering system between coaches, and especially when it comes to play calling, that, is required when you're talking about the Kyle Shanahans, the Sean McVays, Gary Kubiak is somebody I've mentioned. Sean Payton, obviously, is somebody that we've mentioned. at different points. Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich, they've been very good at this, right? Like there's a certain commitment to identity within some of the coaches that we're talking about that allows for the reps, and obviously the reps is probably the biggest piece of this, right? Like you build up to a certain point, so you have that library of plays, so that way you can go, hey, we know that this corner that they have is typically playing one route and one route only. That's how you get that blaze out look from Brandon Ayuk that Jimmy Garoppolo overthrows, right? Like that's not just hey Trevon Diggs jumps double or jumps routes so we can hit him with the double move. Like he knows that as well as you do. And we're still talking about a guy that runs like what low 4.4s, high 4.3s, basically. So you can't just run something at a guy, and treat it like pieces on a chessboard. But that is the difference that we saw, right? Like when Kyle Shanahan needed a play, he was able to get a play, and it wasn't a situation where he ever had to ask Jimmy Garoppolo to play outside of his typical capabilities. We've talked about this on multiple times, multiple different occasions with Dak Prescott. The fact that he's got to take charge of this offense in order to make it go, right? Like there's so much on his shoulders. You want to know what this sounds a whole lot like? The last quarterback that Mike McCarthy had.
Yeah, man.
Before he got a new play caller. This like I don't know if you're going to compare 1-to-1, Dak Prescott does not necessarily have the same arm talent, but if you're talking about what's happening mentally from play to play, this is what it is, right? Because it requires computer brain to be able to work through the progressions as quickly as he does. But sometimes you don't need your quarterback to have a computer brain. Sometimes it's, hey, me as a play caller, because I'm good at my job, I'm going to call a play where it's the second you break the huddle and you look and see the safety shell, oh man, we've been working on this since July. I already know exactly where I'm going with this football. They have no idea what's coming because this is going to look like 80% of the other offense that we've run in this exact same situation before it breaks differently. And I can understand, I think that there's been a cooling off on Kellen Moore over the second half of the season, and especially coming off of Sunday afternoon. So, and I think that game kind of exposed, the area of growth that's still necessary for Kellen Moore to go from, young, promising offensive play caller to a guy that really has a scheme and an identity.
And I'll say that the thing I mentioned that we're talking about getting your quarterback to his first read and so on and so forth, it's not easy.
No.
It's really not easy. I've called plays before. I'm fucking shit at it. It's like really hard.
It's really, especially on the offensive end, it's really hard. Like as a defensive coach, I can just sit and 4 down and play cover 3. And again, to your point, it's going to be sound. You know why?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to bust a coverage. It's hard to mess up your run fit. It's hard to do X, Y, and Z. Like there's a reason why, a defense when their chips is down, what do we see more times than not? Teams are just getting to 4 down and play cover 1 because the idea is that you can't fuck it up. That's the idea, is that you can't mess this up. And that applies here. So, to your point, like it is a lot harder to do what Kellen Moore is doing or to try to get from what Kellen Moore is at to where Kyle Shanahan is at.
Yeah.
Then to go from 0 and to get to where Kellen Moore is at is probably what I would say.
Yes, 100%. But then the thing is, like, it's the second thing that you'd want to see more of because that's a little easier. And they were really bad at creating explosive plays off play action this year. Like that's where you can make some chunk plays, and they could not do it. Right. Again, it's like a good offense it's like an efficient offense per se, but not like an explosive one on off play action of all things with those receivers and everything. Now let's talk about the receivers for a second. Michael Gallup out for the season. Now he had missed time before, but now they're playing the playoff game without him. They do have Blake Jarwin back, so everyone but Michael Gallup is there. CeeDee Lamb plays 59 out of 64 snaps or 63 snaps out wide. He's a really good receiver and he's pretty complete, but he's not a wide receiver. He's a slot receiver, in my opinion. And one of the issues was they just didn't have enough concepts in their offense where he was number 1 on the outside. So you can see examples like, I believe on the interception that he throws, he's coming open on the outside, but it's a third read. And
Right.
Dak takes a chance on the inside, hitch route, curl route. And it's like, I'm not saying it's a good decision, but sometimes like you don't want to, especially with the offensive line that was having troubles, you don't want to always get to your third read. You want to get the ball off. You're a human being. You're not trying to fucking deal with pressure every fucking play you're back there. So now you put CD in outside, and he just doesn't get any balls. And I know I know what you're about to say. In a playoff game, I'm stealing your words here, but in a playoff game, Cedric Wilson cannot have that much more targets than CeeDee Lamb. And Cedric Wilson's a good player, but I'm sorry.
It's as simple as that, dude. It like sometimes it's really simple. Your best players have to touch the ball the most in the biggest games. It's and we're obviously fresh off of watching the Rams win against Arizona, and when we get to that, when we get to that game, we'll kind of talk about the analysis of it. But it's a stark contrast in watching that offense and how well it's operating at getting its best players of football on every third down, every time they're in the red zone, anytime there's pressure coming, where Matthew Stafford is going with the football because the offense is designed to get the ball in those guys' hands when the chips are down. This is not what was happening in Dallas. Like, you can't have a playoff game, especially when you go into. It's not like Michael Gallup got hurt in the first quarter, guys. Like, they've been without him for multiple weeks now, so you know that San Francisco has one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, and they still have it even when Nick Bosa's not there, and we know that because they were still getting after Dallas when Nick Bosa left the game with a concussion. So you can't just have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb outside and Cedric Wilson inside. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a game where Cedric Wilson has 10 targets and CeeDee Lamb has 4. And that can't happen. To add to that, Amari Cooper can't just have 4 yards after the catch. Especially when you're dealing with, and I was looking at this before we started recording this podcast, there's only one player on San Francisco that had more than 5 reps of press all game. That you don't see that in the NFL. I don't care if it's a now screen. Your best player if you're going to get off coverage every time, your best player needs to catch the ball at the line of scrimmage and turn it into a glorified punt return. Again, difference between design and scheme. You want to know what happens if you play off coverage against Mike LaFleur? Or Matt LaFleur? You want to know what happens? Devontae Adams is catching bubble screens. And it's going to be 11 yards, 12 yards, 11 yards, 12 yards every time. And you're gonna pay the price for that. So there has to be some kind of contingency plan, especially coming out of the half, where you say, "Hey, man, we got to get the ball in these guys' hands and opportunities for them to create offense." Instead of saying, "Hey, Dak, we know we're asking you to do everything, but now you got to go do 10 more things to make this offense work." Especially when they're not able to run the ball, and which they weren't, throughout the game. So it's just not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. And I'm not saying that the play calls have to change because, like you said, they're sound, but the sequencing, setting one thing up to get to the next thing, I thought it was very cute when they did it out of necessity, because they were short a tight end for most of the year, but all the extra offensive lineman looks like those are gross in playoff situations if it's not like 3rd and 2. A defense, you're not breaking a defense's mentality for that because they don't have to honor those guys, right? Especially not San Francisco and how big and athletic they are in their front 7. They're not about to flinch at that. It's not like you're playing a team that plays 98% of its snaps in nickel and they actually have to be worried about who's taking on your 5th and 6th offensive linemen. So it's just not enough. There was not enough counter punches, and when they needed it most, they couldn't get it done because San Francisco, by the end of the game, was very clearly as talented or more talented at executing what they needed to do than what Dallas was.
And with them not throwing outside that much, like you said, 10 targets to Cedric Wilson and 7 to Dalton Schultz. I mean, that's crazy to me. 10 also to Cooper, but so many targets inside, not being able to take advantage of some bad corners for San Francisco.
Yes.
And where is San Francisco good on defense? And they're not even a great defense, but where are they good is inside. And this is clinic tape for for pattern matching, zone matching on the inside with Warner and those linebackers and the nickel and the safeties. Like, it was so good watching them pass off routes and find other routes and collapse on receivers that and the Cowboys just did nothing to prevent them from doing that, from saying, hey,
Right.
maybe we have to protect our corners a bit more because they're out there on kind of islands and they're taking advantage of it. They just didn't.
Like another thing, like on top of that, you want to know what else can get team. There's something that you can do in the NFL because you have high levels of speed and talent that you can't really do at every other level of football. And that's when teams get really, really deep in their zone coverage. You actually can outthrow the coverage by going max protection and sending a guy like Amari Cooper who runs a 4.4 or CeeDee Lamb who runs a 4.4 58 yards down the field on some post, and you just uncork it because you can only protect your corners so much right down the field. And at least if you're able to take those type of shots, you want to know what that tells the safeties, that every time I see number 19 more than 12 yards down the field, I got to be ready to sprint because he might be taking off on me, and you might be able to manufacture more space in that deeper intermediate area. But what you're not going to do is change the defense is trying to protect the middle of the field by throwing 8-yard hitch routes outside. Like, you're not doing anything to that defense in those scenarios. You're not changing the math. You're not changing the thought process. And when those throws are happening while the quarterback is also being hit, because even when he's in rhythm, your offensive line is losing in protection. I don't ever have to change as a defensive coach. Not when I got the lead, right? It's not like we got to change it up and start playing cover one to deny the ball, right? Like, you're the one trying to get back in the game here, and that lack of control and that lack of ability to take what San Francisco was doing and play it against them was really disappointing. And that's exactly when you've got to have Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb in the slot and waste Dalton Schultz or Blake Jarwin outside. That's when you've got to waste a Cedric Wilson outside. That's when you got to go empty and put your running back as a number one receiver, on the outside, and just try to find as many ways as possible to get fake offense. Like, this will be a great week to just throw a bunch of shit together to try to manufacture 350 yards of total offense, get your touchdowns, and get the hell out of there with the win. But just trying to go about it with the same thing that they've been doing since week 3 or week 4. When I wrote about how they're like the best offense in the NFL at taking what the defense gives you. Well, what if what the defense is giving you is not good enough to win, man? Like, you got to have a next thing, and they did not have a next thing.
Yeah, and one of the things I think we both, I definitely wrote about this early in the season when they were really clicking on offense, even without Michael Gallup, was they were using a lot of 12 personnel. And then that went away with Blake Jarwin getting injured. They ended up bringing in the offensive lineman to play fullback, and they didn't really get back into it in this game. Now, I know they were down, so part of it, and they couldn't really run a football, but felt like they needed that diversity, and that was helping them. Honestly, like early in the season, their play action game was explosive when they put in these tight ends. And then, it's a lot harder to be explosive when you're in 11 personnel, especially when you're not like Sean McVay 11 personnel.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
and everybody's got to be able to approach things differently. And again, we're bumping into the same topic over and over again,
No,
right?
I
In
know.
direction. It's like it's counter punches, but this is why it's important. Like, you've got to have a counter punch. Like, and I understand because of how they've invested in this roster, you're not just gonna have a third tight end that's also good. You're not really gonna have a fourth wide receiver that's just as good as your third when your third best wide receiver is Michael Gallup, right?
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, and they also pay a lot for their offensive line. Like, you will bump into there is a certain kind of cap on what you can and can't do with your roster. So I'm not trying to completely Monday morning quarterback this thing out and try to just point out all the things that have gone wrong throughout the year and boil it all down to how you lose on Sunday. But again, like, this is where you've got to have some kind of second identity, quote unquote, basically. Like, what are you when things aren't working? What is happening within this offense? I just didn't see enough of that. And once I think San Francisco realized that that's what it was like, and now you can just tear off up the field. You don't got to respect the run. You can jump the snap and they're not taking you vertically on the outside. So, if you're a safety and an inside linebacker, if you just get depth in your drop, your pass rush is going to affect the quarterback. You're never going to be effective enough to win a football game, especially not in the playoffs, not like that. So that to me is it. I think that they do need to find a way to address what they do from an offensive structural standpoint. You have all the talent in place, and if that means bringing in a new head coach, then I think that that's what it's got to be.
All right. We will talk more about the 49ers later in the week as they prepare for their a game against the Packers in Green Bay this weekend. But let's head over to let's flip to the AFC for a second. Let's talk about the Patriots, who have seen their season end. It's funny talking about them because there was a lot of, I think this happened with the Eagles on the NFC side, maybe some other teams, and then for sure the Pats on the AFC side, where it was like, during their win streak, kind of the middle of the season, we did a lot of, hey, this is the team you don't want to face in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And we do that. And I think there's a lot of it where we're just like, the same with the Eagles. We just want to see something different. We want to see upsets.
Right.
We don't want to see the same like quarterbacks who win it every time. But at the end of the day, like, they had a rookie quarterback. He cooled off tremendously. after we wrote all our articles on the
Yep.
Patriots. He cooled
Like,
off
yeah, like
tremendously.
literally you can write, you can like mark a line in his season. Like the once everybody went from, okay, we're not really acknowledging this, to like, okay, I guess we have to acknowledge this. Then he turned right back into the Mac Jones that nobody was acknowledging for the
Exactly.
first half of the year. So yeah, I mean that part does suck for New England. And it's not the end of the world. Like, I think that they absolutely 100% maximize every bit of what they were. I mean, even if we were to take it away from Mac Jones, they were losing this game no matter what, dude. The quarterback you played up against put up 375 yards and 5 touchdowns with no turnovers. Okay, like, you lose that game, especially in the playoffs. You lose. Sorry, that's what it is. So there was only so much that could be done from there, but he did bump his head up against, like, hey man, when the run game is not there for you, when you're not in control of the game situation and you actually do have to drop back 42, 43 times, that's not his game. And that's not the Patriots offense. Even if he were capable of that, that's not what this offense is built to do as far as the rest of the talent around him. Even if had the best, even if this was Trevor Lawrence in this scenario and you had what they have around him, I think he could hang, but he wasn't beating that Bills defense with what's around them. Like, that Bills defense was good enough to win a Super Bowl, even if Josh Allen wasn't as productive as he was on Saturday. So, like, you ran into a buzzsaw. It's basically that's what it is on one end. And if you're evaluating Mac Jones, I think it's a success that New England was able to incubate him the way that they did throughout the year. I do think that we were able to find, I think that it was revealed that he can be a Baker Mayfield-esque quarterback, right? Like, if the run game is good, the play action game will be okay. If he stays in rhythm, and you try to avoid, some of these more obvious passing situations, or it's not all on him. You've got these screens, and we know that Josh McDaniels is as good as it gets at getting the ball to guys on the interior, in the slot, the fullback, or tight ends. That's exactly the kind of scenario that Mac Jones needs to be in. And I think that he's positioned to be nurtured well. But I do think that they're probably about a piece and a half to 2 pieces away, especially on the perimeter, to really keep the field open. And it's going to be interesting to me to see if that's where their priorities actually are, because we know that, like, J.C. Jackson and their linebackers are coming into free agency, and we know how particular Bill Belichick is about the guys who are able and allowed to play within his defense. So I would just hate to see this offense stagnate, because I actually walked away from this season pretty happy with what we saw from Mac Jones. But I don't know if you can just roll this same thing out in the future and expect for it to go the same way.
My question is, and it's funny because I think like maybe a month ago I asked you about the rookie quarterbacks and where you see him. But I just asked you, I mean, taking Trey Lance out of it, but I just asked you about Wilson, Fields, and Lawrence, because at that time it was like, okay, well, clearly Mac Jones, he gets it, he's accurate, blah blah blah, he's making good decisions. We have to bring him. I think we have to bring him back into that group now and say, well, wait a minute now, like, we don't know for sure yet if we have a franchise quarterback here in New England again. Like, there's no guarantee. If people are unsure about Fields and Lawrence and Wilson, then I think we can be unsure about Mac Jones now, because the second half of the season was not very good. He wasn't bad in this game. It just like the stark contrast between him and the guy playing on the other side of the field, it was you can't miss it. I mean, you just can't miss it. So you need to put players around him. Now, Josh Allen was given Stephon Diggs, which helped him last year, but they need to find. We talked about this before. They need to find players to get separation, because teams are just man coverage. Teams are just playing man coverage against them and just giving them a load of trouble. They just don't have those type of players.
Buffalo was sitting on everything. They were squatting on everything that New England tried to run. And some of that is seeing a team 3 times in, what was that, like 6 weeks, 7 weeks? So that is a piece of it. Buffalo was just a more talented team, but they've got to find somebody on the perimeter that can win one-on-ones. And even if, you do have a guy rolled over the top or there's help available, where Mac Jones can feel confident throwing a tight window throw and that you'll go win those passes. It was one of the reasons why, when all the stuff happened with Odell Beckham, I actually thought that New England might be interested or be in on him for that reason, because I thought that there was potential there to get that kind of guy in the building. But I do think that, like, whether it's by draft, we'll see kind of how everything shakes out. It's not like I expect a player like a Drake London to be available in that range. And if he is, I can guarantee you that there are going to be a lot of contending teams or teams with the need for an outside receiver trying to trade to get in front of them. But they do need to address it either with the veteran or in the draft, because that's an immediate need for their future.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's, like I said, the man coverage stuff, which is too much for them, and then seeing the Bills do that. The first game of the season, obviously they only threw the ball 3 times, but the next 2 games, just seeing them sit on every single route, not being able to get any separation. I think we can put Mac Jones back in that group where we're still uncertain, and I think, I'm not sure. He did have probably a higher ceiling than any of the guys, any other rookies, in terms of like continuous play over a few weeks than any of the other guys did, the other rookies. Mm-hmm. But now I bring him back in the fold and I say, okay, but I liked Lawrence and Fields in terms of what they brought athletically more than him. So do I now, I think I got to put them back ahead of Mac Jones. I don't know. And I liked a lot of the stuff that Mac Jones did this year. But then when I'm projecting forward, I'm like, oh, maybe I got to go back to my priors.
Evaluate. Basically. Yep. That's kind of where I'm at too.
So let's talk about the other side of the field. Let's talk about Josh Allen quickly. Again, we'll talk about them because we're both really excited to get into this Bills-Chiefs matchup later on this week. But Josh Allen, one of the best playoff games of all time. It's funny because I think everyone said, man coverage, they're getting man. Bill's going to play man against them. And you know what? He didn't. Yeah. Not that much. There's not a high amount of man. When the few times that he did play man, and I think there's a bit of it is probably randomness, but this is kind of what we're saying about play callers getting your quarterback to your first read. It was like every time they called man, just so happened Brian Daboll had the man beater on. Yes. And they were cooked.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, well, there you go.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Not the way that he's throwing the ball now, moving away from his targets and then throwing across the field.
Disgusting.
I've never seen this before in my life.
Disgusting.
It's disgusting. And then when they played zone, it's funny. This part of the evolution of Josh Allen is 2 things. I think he's able to make plays against zone, they're not necessarily down the field. They don't necessarily need to be down the field, especially in the middle of the field. Now he hit a couple. There was 2 big plays on down the sideline, technically against zone, but those are all just one-on-one throws, right? So it's a little different. but he wasn't like forcing anything really over the middle unless it came open super clean. There was like that Beasley catch where like everyone dropped him and he was like super wide open over the middle. But he threw the ball to checkdowns. And, when you play against the Bills, when you play zone coverage, and we talked about this before, you can't just sit at 6 yards with your underneath zone droppers. You got to get depth because you know what type of offense they're running. So Josh Allen has no problem saying, check it down, check it down, check it down. And he's been super accurate. He gets the ball out, and the ball comes with so much velocity on like a check down or a swing. And they're creating so much opportunities after the catch. And then the weird thing in this game was, we always talk about, with a scrambling quarterback, got to play zone. Got to play zone. You got to have eyes on him. Dude, it did not matter. He scrambled against zone and cooked guys. Judon and the DB, it was unbelievable. So, they did, to a certain degree, they got what they want. The Patriots got what they wanted out of playing zone, kind of theoretically. It didn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Well, what are you supposed to do when the quarterback you're facing off against can turn into 3 different quarterbacks at any given point in the game? Okay, we play man. He scrambles and kills us. Okay, let's play man with the spy, or let's play with the contain rush. Well, now he's just going to back up, extend, and throw the ball over everybody's head anyway. Yeah. Okay, that didn't work. Let's play zone. Oh, and now he's dinking and dunking and throwing the ball over the middle of the field. What's the play call? What do you have left on your play sheet now outside of zero blitzing the guy, which you do at your own risk if you want to deal with Stephon Diggs with no safety over the top? I don't. And I think that also the way that they've evolved everything else around him. I had posted this with our colleagues in our workspace, but he's also been the best runner of the football as a quarterback in the league, basically since they lost to the Patriots. Most carries, the loss to the Patriots in December, that 3-pass game or whatever, most in carries, almost the most yards per carry, basically at a certain threshold, the most missed tackles forced, most first downs game, most touchdowns scored. And obviously a piece of that is scrambling. And then I wanted to look and see what are they actually designing runs for him? And they are. He was still leading the NFL in carries, yardage, and basically all of the same production metrics, even on designed runs. And that kind of blew me away. And that let me know that from all the conversations that we had and kind of watching them evolve over the year, we saw them go from we're an 11 personnel team. And if we're not in 11, we're in 10 because we're leaning all the way into the spread. And we're always going to be wide open, no condensed sets, we're not really motioning or anything like that. Everybody knows where everybody's going to be, and we're just running these plays. And then they went extremely
running your receivers on vertical cylinder routes
exactly. Yeah, we all have our silos. We don't communicate with each other at all. We're just running our little seam or whatever up the seams and up the sidelines. And then they swung in an extreme direction opposite, right? And they started running 13 personnel. It started looking like the Cardinals, right? What we talk about the Cardinals, where everything gets all disjointed because it's hard to be a spread team and also do all the other things you need to do in the NFL to be successful. And now I think they found a much more comfortable middle ground. I think they found good gadget players with Isaiah McKenzie, and the way that
player,
they him. The fact that you could just pull that guy up. Hey, we're gonna give you 6, 7, 8 touches, and they're all gonna be the best touches of the game. So they have found a great balance, and I think that this is as good as it gets. Saturday was as good as it's going to be between a play caller wrapping his game plan around how hot his quarterback is. It never once at any point felt like Dable made a bad call or Josh Allen misexecuted the play call that was given to him. Everything was hitting, and that's a credit to what they've got on offense. And when you stack that on top of the way they've played defensively, man, they're going to be trouble. I don't know how anybody can feel comfortable playing against them going forward in the playoffs.
Well, I said this a few weeks ago on the podcast because I saw after the regular season that if you flipped all the one-score games in the league, the Bills would be 15-1. And it's oh boy.
Well, exactly. What does that tell you is that, man, they're right here. And if they turn if they turn the corner, it's bad news.
So yeah, and again, super excited to really dive into their matchup against the Chiefs who dismantled the Pittsburgh Steelers, like they did just a couple weeks ago. There's nothing to say about the Chiefs. I still, honestly, I still didn't think it was a super impressive game by Mahomes, but it didn't matter. They ran the ball super well.
Right.
They really had a good time in both games against a pretty good defensive line. With T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward, they really just dominated them in a lot of ways. In running the football, pass protection, and so it was nothing really to see. I guess the question is really when we talk about teams that are out with the Steelers, it's certainly the end of
Right.
the Roethlisberger era. Going forward, is it do you take a quarterback as
They're
early
in a
as
funny
possible?
spot. They're
I
in a
don't
really
know.
funny spot because they have a lot of talent at the skill position
Yeah,
spots.
man.
Like you don't want to just waste that, and it's hard to accumulate what they've done. Knowing what we know about the Steelers, where they're not a trade team, they don't spend big money in free agency unless it's a guy that's already in the building, and they don't trade draft picks. Like outside of Minka Fitzpatrick is like one of the biggest acquisitions that they've made that was not like a free agent signing or a draft pick, like literally ever, because they don't do things like that. So the fact that they're still positioned the way that they are is it's impressive. I do think this could not have happened in a worse year in terms of like what's available in the draft
That's the
from a
problem, man.
quarterback perspective. And now that puts you in an uncomfortable position as a franchise, right? Like do you want to gamble on the retread thing? Like, do you want to do the? Not, I'm just throwing this name out here because it's the most obvious name that comes to mind. Like, do you want to do the Teddy Bridgewater thing for a year and just like literally bridge year it and maybe you go 7-10?
I don't know.
So you're not going to be bad enough to bottom out, but not good enough to win your division. And that which leaves you in the same place in terms of like franchise positioning that you are this year for cheap, or are you going to break from what this franchise has been for basically all of my lifetime and my
Yeah,
father's lifetime,
and
which
trade for
is
Russell Wilson.
right, exactly, or
Like
some shit like that, right?
yeah,
Like, and I just can't see it for I can't see that for the Steelers. That they've never operated that way, and I doubt that they would do that now. And based on the way that this defense played, I also would not want to overinvest in the quarterback position, knowing that other things need to be addressed for them. So like they're in a funny spot, but I do think that you've got to try to find a way to bring in a guy that you can develop at the quarterback spot going forward.
yeah, and like it's going to be interesting to see how the quarterback dominoes fall in the draft because for me, when I look at the draft class, I see a lot of second rounders, but I see a lot of second rounders who are going to get picked in the first round. So like, do with no skin in the game, I always say the same thing. Well, I'll just wait till my pick, whatever they're picking in the second round, in the 60s or whatever, in the 50s, whatever quarterback comes to me, I'll pick him. Like whoever
Right.
falls to me, that's good value for me because I don't know who's gonna end up turning out to be good, and there's a glut of these type of quarterback in this draft, like a second round quarterback. Um, but again, that's me without any skin in the game, where it's like, oh my god, we don't have a quarterback. Like, we can't
Right.
you don't like I can waste a year because I'm theoretical about this. I'm hypothetical about this, and a lot of teams don't want to waste a year. Mike Tomlin, I don't think wants to waste a year. I think
I mean, he's
they
what is it?
obviously
Never
know,
missed the playoffs or never had a losing record. Excuse
like
me, never been below 500.
they. I think I would imagine they know what they had in Roethlisberger. They're not dummies. They're not
Right.
blind. If we can see the issues that Roethlisberger had these last couple of years, they can too. So I do wonder if they're like, hey, we got to go get somebody now. Like like you said, the roster is too good. The offensive line will look better with someone who's not a statue back there. And the skill position is too good. I mean, you took Najee Harris in the first round. I'm not saying that was a good pick. I think he's a really good player, but you have him. The receiving core is really good. You found the tight end from Penn State, Frymuth, who's been a really good addition. The roster is not bad enough that it's just they're in such a weird spot, man. They're
I
not
mean,
picking high enough. I don't know.
yep. They're not. They're just never. I mean, this is Steelers we're talking about in Mike
Yeah,
Tomlin. Like they're literally just never going to be bad enough to bottom out. but they're also not going. They're also not going to go all in the way that the Rams have, the way we know the Rams have year
Exactly.
over year. So like
They're not trading
this
three
is
firsts for Russell Wilson. Like it's not gonna
right.
happen.
That's just not that's never been their approach, and it won't be their approach. So like this just is one of those uncomfortable kind of purgatory years that I think they're going to bump into. And the hope is that, and I think the hope is that you go out and draft a guy and bring in a veteran as
I
well.
think that's
And
exactly what
just
it is.
you just let them battle it out, like, and you hope for what I think Kyle Shanahan hoped for with the 49ers, right? Which is that Trey Lance comes in and he just kicks everybody's ass so
Yeah.
convincingly that it's clear that by at least halfway through the season, the rookie's got to take over. The issue is that, like, I just don't know if any of the quarterbacks that are available right now in the draft have the ceiling to get there. And I would kind of gag if they just go with the guy who's closest to home and take in Kenny Pickett because he had the most productive season of the quarterbacks that are in the draft, and just see if that works out. What, like, I don't know. There's no ideal answer. I guess is just kind of what I keep circling.
It's
around.
really not, and you get the sinking feeling that they're gonna be the Broncos, like what the Broncos just were this year, where it's like a young kid and a veteran guy, and it just doesn't work.
Right.
All right, that's enough of the Steelers. Let's head over to the NFC, and let's talk about your Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts.
So I don't have a lot for this one. This one's probably requires maybe the least amount of analysis, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because the analysis is the quarterback stunk.
He was bad. Worst quarterback. Like, we just watched Kyler Murray be bad, and I almost feel comfortable saying that Jalen Hurts like was worse by a wide margin. Like it was bad.
That will be interesting to see. Like again,
so we'll have to go back and look because it's fresh. Yeah. But like when I went back and watched Jalen Hurts, I mean that was bad. Rough, dude. Like it's rare. You see this in college. Like you almost never see this in the NFL. But like it was very clear that Tampa's DBs were looking at Hurts and saying, if he's not staring in this direction, he's not getting over here in his progression. So we can just get depth and just cut guys loose. And if he gets to him, good for him. But we're not going to honor. They were not honoring him the way that you would honor a lot of quarterbacks, and it sucks to see because he obviously had such a nice stretch of the second half of the season to even get Philadelphia. Like the fact that Philadelphia was able to get to this point and make the playoffs was on the back of a lot of the progress that he made in the middle of the season when they got hot. So it sucks for the season to end like that, and now you're leaving a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. Which obviously doesn't help, like when we start talking about what the future is going to look like for this franchise and this quarterback. But man, it was tough to look at. It's tough to look at him miss guys up the middle of the field on plays that would have went for touchdowns, 30, 40, 50-yard gains. And when you are throwing to the sideline, you're late or it's after you've been flushed out because you're not decisive enough about what you're seeing down the field. Like you just can't win. You can't win as a quarterback in the situations that Hurts was putting himself in.
You know, I was very much in this mindset before this game saying, you know what, he did a lot right. I know there's issues in the pass game, but you can build a running game where he's involved and you can get a nice play action game going and you can kind of play to his strengths a bit. And you go and take 2 offensive players in the first round, maybe 3 offensive players in the first round, and you just say we're going to go after it. You take another receiver, you get a nice slot, you refresh on the offensive line, whatever it is, running back, I don't care, tight end, another tight end, I don't care what it is, and he's just good enough that you can do it. And this game, and I know it's just a prisoner of the moment type thing, but this game, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I don't know, it's just not good enough. Yeah. It's just not good enough. It's all the stuff you said. Like either you're late throwing outside or you don't even want to throw over the middle of the field. And then therefore you're missing guys running free in those areas. And we said it, last week on the podcast, like what the Tampa Bay defense is a run stopping defense. And they give you these holes, these big pockets of space, in front of the safety, behind the linebackers. And you saw some plays. You saw Goddard get into those areas. You saw Devonta get into those areas. And he won't throw it. He just won't throw it. Like, I don't even know what to say. He won't throw it.
What are you supposed to do, man, if the guy won't throw it? Like, the field in the NFL, like, you cannot manipulate the field in the NFL if your quarterback won't work the middle of the field, man. Like, it just doesn't work. There's not enough space to manufacture to make it work. That's how you end up with them throwing a swing pass on basically every third down in the first quarter because you know that he's just not in a position to, leverage the middle of the field at all. Like, it's just it was just rough to watch.
Yeah,
not just as a fan, but as an analyst. Like, I just don't like to see a quarterback struggle like that because I think that Tampa Bay is still kind of like vulnerable, especially in the middle of the field.
I don't know anything about Tampa Bay after this game on offense or defense. I know nothing about them.
I learned nothing.
Dude,
I don't
they were
know.
playing safety sometimes at like 8 yards, like early in the game.
Like, that's come on, man. Come on. Like, come on. Like, you were telling me in no uncertain, like, you're telling me very clearly how you feel about this offense.
Yeah.
Like, and in a way, like, this almost sets Tampa Bay back because the team they're about to see is rolling right now. Like, and it ain't going to, whatever they saw on Saturday or Sunday is not going to be what they see next week against Los Angeles.
Yeah. So like, 100%. Just staying on the Eagles. Well, this game for 1 second, you look at the Tampa Bay offense, and we saw it earlier in the season on the Thursday night game. It was Thursday night or Monday night, anyways, when they played up in Philly.
It was Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, and dink and dunk. This is a offense that is just a defense in Philadelphia that's gonna play off and force you to check the ball down. But man, Tom Brady's too good for that. He's like he made these 3-yard slants, these 3-yard in routes, these swing routes, the flat routes look so good. He makes it look so good.
He makes the most boring shit in football looks like so impressive.
He has this snap now that I don't think he did early in his career in terms of his throwing mechanics. And this is kind of some of the new stuff that I know that Tom House does with his quarterbacks. But like, with that and the gene editing, like it's crazy where he is. like the ball just jumps out of his hand in a way that it shouldn't for a guy his age. And he doesn't make mistakes. And the Eagles defense is not going to do that. Because it can't. They just don't have the players. But I think they don't have the players. I was
to say off coverage, zone coverage, man. Like, honestly, you could have turned this game on blind, or you could have given me zero information about how these two teams actually played throughout the season, and just told me the players involved in the style of play, and I would have told you that Tampa Bay was going to march up and down the field in the first 3 drives, and that was going to be enough margin of victory for them to walk through and play the rest of the game in second gear.
Yeah, so that we didn't learn anything at the Bucks. They didn't really run a lot of concepts on offense. It was all like the same like conceptual idea in the passing game. Like we've talked about this before, like left to right reads, right to left reads, just kind of easy stuff over the middle. It wasn't very pretty. Would you, Diante? Well, not you, but the listener, want a chance to win the ultimate game day feast, whether it's financial success or Jesus, I can't speak. All right, we're going to try this again. We're going to do this again. Maybe I'll do it in French this time. It'll ease my All right. Want a chance to win the ultimate game day feast? Whether it's football success or financial savvy, winning starts with asking us questions. Would you like to know what it's like behind the scenes with Al Michaels on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Every submission earns you a chance to win the ultimate feast to celebrate football's favorite Sunday. We'll cover your catering up to $2,500, coordinate your order from a restaurant near you, and have it delivered on February 13th, 2022. And, of course, don't forget to check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/feast, westernsouthern.com/feast. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. All right. Finally, the team that Tampa Bay is going to play are going to be the Los Angeles Rams, who I think, as we've seen now 3 games of Rams versus Cardinals, I think this blowout was coming, in my opinion. I don't think they were nearly as bad as the loss early in the season, and then they put it on them a bit in Arizona,
Yep.
maybe a month and a half ago,
Mhm.
and then just the way the Cardinals are playing. So again, we'll talk about the Bucks and Rams on the podcast later this week, but like the Cardinals, man, it's weird. I don't really have an answer for this whole like Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray just
I was
tank.
gonna say, like,
I don't know,
are
man.
do we still in the exact same position we've been in with those two? We're like, there's how can you say anything definitive about this team still, which to me is now starting to turn into an indictment. Like, we just can't string this thing out forever and just say, hey, like, it's getting incrementally closer each time. Like, I don't know if I don't know if I have any clarity on whether or not this is a good marriage. Um, at least like when it's not working for you as an offensive guy and a quarterbacks guy, what are you seeing?
Well, my thing is like, and I thought about this today, like while the game was going on, because it's like, yeah, even though they made the playoffs, I think there's going to be questions about Cliff's future there. And then I just wonder, like, what would change? Like, I actually think this is the best offense for Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Like, they run the ball um, kind of good. The fact that they are a spread team kind of allows them to run the ball pretty well.
Yeah.
Here I'm just like they finished. I mean, it's a negative EPA per play because every team that runs football
Runs the ball
averages
right.
negative EPA per play. But eighth this year, running the football. Last year in the
I mean, they're
regular
good at
season,
it, man. They're good at
they're
it.
good. It's
The
fourth
combo of
last
him and
year.
James Conner is like actually a really good quarterback running back tandem in the run game.
Fourth in 2019 in the regular season. So like they get what they can get out of the run game, and I think a lot of that has to do with them being super spread and like giving themselves light boxes and being able to work in that type of world. Giving the offensive line the ability to work in that type of world. But the passing game is just going to be, and we talked about this before with like Russell Wilson and some other guys. Like the passing game is going to be what Kyler does. And I actually think the air raid kind of works because they're just going to throw, if you put Hopkins out there, and obviously that was him not playing the past month is a big reason why this offense sucked.
Yes.
Like, what you're getting. You're going to throw your one-on-one balls to, they probably eventually going to have to find a replacement for AJ Green, who was really a smart pickup by them.
Dude, like one of the best finds in the offseason. Like,
Uh,
no question.
and they're getting better in the slot with Ertz and Christian Kirk had a really good season. Like it just seems like that offense actually works. Like as much as it puts a lot on Kyler Murray to be a playmaker, to be for the receivers to be one on ones. Like you couldn't put him in an offense where you look at like LaFleur's offense in Green Bay, and he's like, okay, well, who's our best receiver? Okay, it's in Green Bay it's Adams, and then with the Cardinals it would be Hopkins. We'll move him around, put him there, and then move this, and then do this route with him when he's there, and then with this, he's there. These other times he plays slide, he plays wide, he plays X, he plays Z. I don't think that works with Kyler. So it's like I just think like as much as like I'm not like super impressed by Kliff, I don't know if anyone else would get more out of Kyler.
No. No. I mean, especially not like watching a game like this where I'm like, dude, I mean, to your point, I don't think that you can be anything other than a spread gets with this quarterback. Like, and when you do that, there are just certain struggles you're going to have with your offensive line. Like, sorry, first of all, it's just too hard in the NFL to even put together like 3+ starters on the offensive line, let alone get 4 or 5. So, like, that makes matching up against the Rams specifically like really, really difficult because they have 3 pass rushers between Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, and Von Miller. Like, so you're kind of up against it as is. Um, so a lot of the things that are holes for them just happen to be like super exposed when they play the Rams because they aren't the same. The Rams don't have any of those types of holes to exploit defensively, not in the way that the Cardinals like to exploit holes defensively. But really, to me, like the thing that I walk away from this particular game with, like, and it's simple. It's just 2 words, man. Stars matter. Like is DeAndre Hopkins worth 23 points? No, but he's probably worth about half of the 10 first downs that they didn't, or the 10 third downs that they didn't convert. Like, and that stuff matters within the flow of the game. And Los Angeles had their stars available, and their stars were rolling. So I don't know. I mean, if you're the Cardinals and you're looking at the Rams, that to me, that's kind of got to be the blueprint for what they are, as long as they have Kyler at the helm. Like, you got to load up stars and scrubs as much as it is, especially on the offensive end, and then just hope that you let it rip and he stays hot and
That's
healthy
it.
long enough to get you all the way through. Like, that's what it is. Like, the Vance Joseph thing, for as much as like it makes me want to peel my skin off sometimes watching them play defense, like, I actually think that that's also a functional way to play defense, given the way that they play offense. Just trying to maximize possessions for your offense is basically what they're doing, for playing for negative plays. So I do think that, like, I don't think they're in a bad space, which is why I don't just want to come out and condemn them for me not having clarity on how I feel about Kyler Murray and Kliff Kingsbury. Like, I don't want to superimpose that on their whole franchise situation. Um, but I do think that this offseason is going to be key, because the way that they've started to build this thing now, like, I've watched this with the Eagles. Once you start going all in, you kind of got to stay all in until it's too expensive to be all in, and then you're going to bottom out. Like, the bottom out year is going to come for Arizona eventually, I think, like, because they just have some massive talent deficits that I don't think they can make up in enough time to beat, like, Kyler Murray also becoming like the most expensive quarterback in the league, which is where he's trending, honestly. Like, so it's just going to be tough. You're in a tough franchise spot like this, and at this point now, you just got to roll the dice that you can get in as many stars as you can. Not throw the draft completely to the side, man. But this is about getting as many good players on the offense around Kyler Murray as you can, and hoping that you can ride him all the way to an NFC Championship game, or at worst.
Before we get out of here, something that you were telling to me during the game, actually, talking about their usage of Jordan Simmons, who, really hasn't been. I mean, it's still early, but really hasn't been the player that they envisioned coming out of Clemson. And you were basically saying, man, they should have just used him like Micah Parsons.
I mean, that was, if you go back and watch him at Clemson, that's exactly how Brent Venables used him. Like, anytime they had a blitz to call, you want to know who was as close to the line of scrimmage as it gets? It's Isaiah Simmons. Like,
Yeah.
all the disguises was all built around Isaiah Simmons. Like, and this is the reason why I say it is not so much because I look at Micah Parsons and I look at Isaiah Simmons, somebody who I think everybody who knows me knows I was very high on
Yeah.
coming into the NFL. Like, that's not me looking at this like the Wolverine meme, and just wishing that it worked out that way, or me thinking that it would be just as good if they did that. But they made a position change. Like, Isaiah Simmons was a nickel, like, he was basically a safety in college, and they brought him here to be their middle linebacker. Like, it just does not. It doesn't fit his profile. I don't know. Like, they clearly are privy to information that I'm not, right. And for all I know, dude, Isaiah Simmons might have been in the pre-draft process talking about how he didn't want to play on the perimeter in the NFL, and the Cardinals happen to be the one team that would abide by putting him in the box. Like, that's a possibility. I don't know if that's the case, considering how much and how comfortable he was with what he did at Clemson, but maybe. But to watch him be turned into a middle linebacker in the way that the Cardinals play defense, where their defensive line is legitimately just playing for TFLs and damn near nothing else, and now you're asking a linebacker who is tall and is heavy-ish, but is not like linebacker heavy, and he's just like regular linebacker size, basically, to be your thumper that cleans up everything behind him, man. Like, that's just a tall ask. That's not what he was ever asked to do at the college level. And I think that's why they have so much trouble trying to maximize his snaps. Like, I forgot the name that they said that comes in on rundowns, but like, the fact that I can't remember his name tells me that you're playing Isaiah Simmons in the wrong role if you got to take him off the field for some regular schmegular linebacker on first down or whatever. Then he's not being used properly, because you can't make the argument that your best 11 athletes are on the field defensively, and Isaiah Simmons is not one of them. Your math is wrong. So I would like to have seen him be used more as a blitzer, the way that Micah Parsons is used in Dan Quinn's scheme, which every time they want to get a 5-man rush, he's the fifth rusher coming
Every
from one
time.
angle or another. Like, that would be perfect for them, especially when they were healthy and you got Chandler Jones and JJ Watt and all that stuff, like, and all the stuff that they're able to do in terms of their like bluff pressure looks, and they blitz guys like Buda Baker from all over the place. Like, they're the opportunity to be like one of the most multiple pressure teams that we've ever seen in the NFL is there. And I'm just hoping that there's more opportunity to build on it and that they try to increase his role outside of linebacker instead of just trying to make him a better linebacker.
And if I'm not mistaken, so they take Jordan Simmons 2 years ago. Last year they take Xavier Collins, another inside linebacker type. I think Xavier Collins was a guy who at Tulsa played on the edge a bit and played as an off-ball line. So you have these guys who could just do stuff, like you said with Buda Baker. Hope he's okay. I don't know. We saw him go to the hospital.
We're hoping. Obviously, we'll get updates as this goes on, but hopefully he's okay.
And then
you got Byron Murphy who can play inside and out. You know, like the potential for multiplicity is there, man. Like,
the only thing I'll say is maybe they're not good. Maybe they're best.
Honestly, like, sometimes it's just that simple, man.
Yeah. I know everyone wants to be like, oh, it's everything situationally. If you put a guy there, I saw a tweet like that today where it's like everything is situational. It was about Odell Beckham. It's like, no, let's not. Some people aren't good. Some players aren't good, and no matter what team you put them on, what system you put them on, they wouldn't be good. And that might be the case with these two linebackers that they take, and it sucks because they had a chance to make some plays if they hit on two guys at the draft. Right, like because that's what they need right now. Like you said, it's just like they got to go all out. They have to go all out. So that's it. Those are the teams that are gone.
We'll talk about the matchups between the teams.
Oh, the Raiders! Oh my God, the Raiders!
I mean, dude, what do you?
I forgot the Raiders. Oh my God, dude, I'm so bad. I wrote an article like the strengths and weaknesses of each NFL playoff team last week, and I forgot to write about the Raiders. Okay, the Raiders quickly. We'll just do the Raiders quickly because Mike Mayock is out.
Yes.
Obviously, Gruden's out.
Yes.
Rich Bisaccia did a hell of a job. Keeping this whole thing together, getting to the playoffs, getting them, within a yard basically, or 10 yards from going to overtime with Cincinnati and maybe going to the divisional round. Guess what? It don't matter. He's out. I can't see it. I think they're going to go find a big time celebrity quote unquote head coach like they did with Gruden, and that's it.
Yeah, it's not Bisaccia's fault. He did his job. But when you have all of the off-field issues that they had with their players, and then you add in the fact that your head coach turned out to be like a massive kind of racist behind closed doors, what that means is that everybody that he hired to work for him is also getting fired, not because they're also closeted racists, but because the whole regime's got to change. And that's what's happening in that football building. And just like you said, I mean, John Gruden was hired on a 10-year, $100 million deal because he was expected to be the ambassador of the Las Vegas Raiders after they made their relocation move and basically give them credibility on their way through it. And now they don't have that. And trust me, Mark Davis is not here as the second generation owner for his franchise to lose credibility, especially given the way that some of their players have misbehaved off the field. So this is going, like, if you're ever looking for a situation where it's like the grizzled veteran head coach who's been at 4 or 5 different stops, even if they've only ever been 500 everywhere he's at. Like, if Jeff Fisher was still in the coaching market, I don't know where he would end up right now. He would be the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. Okay, that's what I expect them to do. But I will say for Bisaccia that this is going to be a very convincing mark in his resume. For a guy who's been like a special teams coordinator, and obviously we saw the worst version of this with Joe Judge, but I think that you see the potential of getting a player development type of guy in one of these scenarios where he can step in, help make a pivot in this culture, and legitimately salvage the season that I completely expected to go off the rails after the Gruden firing. So, I think that in both situations, both for Bisaccia and for the Raiders, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, in my opinion, for making the most out of this situation, because I don't know if anybody could have expected it to go as well as it did, considering the circumstances.
All right. Bengals, Titans, 49ers, Packers, Bills, Chiefs, Rams, Bears. Very early, which is the game you're looking forward to the most?
That's a good one. Packers Niners.
Oh, really?
Packers Niners.
It was close when they played
I
on Sunday night early in the season.
I'm not crazy enough to call upset. I'm not crazy enough to call upset. I repeat, I am not crazy enough to call upset. But if you're gonna put a gun to my head, that's the one I'd have my eye on. Like legitimate underdog, not like Rams Bucks where we're talking about like two even teams basically and one just having home field advantage.
Yeah.
But like legit underdog, I would expect if there's gonna be one who could do it next week, I think that the Niners have a replica. What they do defensively and offensively, you can replicate enough times to where I can be a believer that you can beat a team that's more talented than you.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Too High Podcast, and we will see you later this week.